everyone. Welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. Joining me today, Karl, how should I even introduce you?
I am Karl Olson, occasional writer, apparently the only guy who understood Fully Coolly Progressive as per Jason DeMarco himself. I just released a new drum and bass album that I named after a bit from Asobi Asabase. So, yeah, what can you introduce me as? I'm just that guy who means that when we have things like this to talk about, you're not just talking to yourself.
You know what? At one point I considered doing this podcast episode myself, but I talked myself out of it, thankfully. But yes, today.
I'm happy to be here, though.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, as always, Karl. So we are going to talk about a number of things in this episode. The most important thing is a new television channel that's going to be launching in Canada. A television channel. Why should anyone give a crap about that? Well,
that's a good question.
Yeah. So this new channel is a new youth television channel and also a streaming initiative that's set to be launched eventually in Canada. Not this year, unfortunately. But it is notable because it is all but confirmed, more or less, to be carrying some anime content. Most likely anime content targeted at a millennial/adult audience, although, I don't think they still consider millennials adults. The new channel is being launched.
Well, no, at this point, millennials are adults. They have to come up with the pre-millennial name because those people are turning into adults.
Well, no, as of the end of this year, all millennials will officially be adults, but
it's crazy.
For marketing purposes, they're not adults. They're the extension of youth. This new channel is being launched by WoW Unlimited. And there's been buzz about this station launching for a while now, and this is a subject that I've honestly been kind of restraining myself from talking about on the show, namely because there still have not been any formal confirmed programming announcements. And, as if you listen to the show for a while, you would know that I have made many predictions and anticipations in the past about stations that will be broadcasting anime that never wound up being even remotely true. In this case, though, the TV station's senior vice president, Marnie Schulman, has actually been remarkably transparent on social media about the new station and in the fact that they're interested in acquiring and airing anime content. We can pretty much safely say the station is going to launch on April 1st, 2019, and the reason we know that is because they have a weird CRTC contract. They had until either the end of this year to launch, or they have to wait until April 1st to launch. So it's safe to say that this station will finally launch in April 1st. It has been, on April 1st, it's been an extended kind of project. I do want to, off the bat, say, just because I know that, a lot of you probably aren't going to listen to the end of the episode, so I'll just say it now. So this WoW station, which will likely be carrying anime, it's not guaranteed to be on every cable and satellite provider in Canada. Notably, Rogers and Shaw might not have it. Which is a significant chunk of the viewing audience that would be.
Well, and why would this be?
Well, the reason is because WoW Unlimited is actually the rebranding of Bell's existing channel, Comedy Gold. So basically, if you get Comedy Gold or you have a provider that has Comedy Gold, you will have this WoW TV channel that's set to launch next year. Pretty much guaranteed. If you're on a service that does not get that channel, there's a very strong chance that you will not get the WoW TV channel when it launches. And if that is the case, I strongly urge you to contact, if you have Shaw or you have Rogers, if your parents or other family members have Shaw or Rogers, if you have friends who have Shaw and Rogers and are too lazy to call them themselves, I urge you to contact these providers, ask them, make sure that they carry this channel on April 1st. Tell them you want to see this channel on April 1st, because making sure that it's as widely available as possible across the country is going to be extremely important. And, remember, the purpose of anime airing on TV is to expose it to new people, not so much to have, this to watch yourself. So just keep in mind the breadth of the audience that we need to reach here.
It's a long-term thing.
Yeah.
And it's such, like, the one thing I do have to say kind of off the bat is it's just so sketchy launching a new linear channel in 2018 in a market that's already, I put it this way, at a demographic that is leaning away from linear television, at least linear television that's part of a package, because there has been some success with launching new over-the-top stuff that's like Cheddar, that new sort of like financial newsy network thing in the States, has done pretty decently for effectively only being an over-the-top offering. But it's like, yeah, it's interesting to be like, it's so heavily tied to an existing media company in Bell and other existing media companies, in as much as WoW is the combination of what, Frederator and Rainmaker?
Well, let's maybe summarize what this is. So, we don't actually know what the name of the channel is going to be yet. I thought that it was going to be WoW TV. But there actually already is a WoW TV in Canada. It's a Chinese language specialty station. As far as I'm concerned, whichever one airs anime gets to be the real WoW TV. But I think there's a good chance it's actually not going to be called that. On Crave, which is of course Bell's streaming service, WoW is already launching some content on there, and it's being branded as WoW World. So it's possible that this station is going to be called WoW World. I don't know yet. We're going to have to wait and see. It might be, we're probably not going to know until there's like another press release or something. But WoW Unlimited, that's the name of the company, that emerged after Rainmaker Studios, which is like the corporate entity that sort of, that Mainframe Entertainment morphed into, over the years. It actually acquired Frederator Studios. Frederator Studios, they run Cartoon Hangover in the States. That was the studio that made Adventure Time, more or less.
Well, I mean, I think more importantly, they had like a lot of online experimentation. Like the interesting thing is it's almost kind of a bit of a backwards move for Frederator, in as much as they had leaned so heavily into being online first with stuff like Bee and Puppy Cat and Bravest Warriors.
Those are the two shows that people know this.
Yeah,
Frederator the most for.
Well, I mean, put it this way, especially in like this modern, modern context, Adventure Time is arguably one of the last big things Frederator pushed to traditional television, and was largely, I mean, they were the production company on it, but I think a lot of the studio talent was actually still at just CN Burbank, as if I recall correctly. Like, they were more a production company rather than housing people. So it's interesting to sort of see that, now they're, I mean, not that streaming isn't part of what's being offered here, but like I said, linear television launch in 2018, albeit though Sabert's involved, right?
Sabert is involved.
This is the guy who launched MTV and who guided Nicktoons original programming early on, and then moved to Cartoon Network to do to launch What A Cartoons, and then moved back to, he's got the chops to do it. Like if he can't pull it off, no one on this planet can.
Fred Sabert, he is the controlling shareholder of WoW Unlimited, and it's worth noting he frequently cites Crunchyroll as an example to follow for reaching niche audiences, or at least I believe it was him who has mentioned that in interviews in relation to WoW Unlimited strategy.
And it's fair because he's familiar with it, probably via a lot of the Cartoon Hangover stuff also being available on Verve, which is
part of
Otter
Elation.
Media. Yeah, well, Elation to Otter Media to, which is therefore also Crunchyroll, which is now all AT&T and now also Warner Media. And that's another weird question I have in the air with some of this.
We're going to get to the impending streaming apocalypse later, I think. But yeah, there's some shared DNA with all that stuff here that's in what's constructed WoW Unlimited. But it started with Rainmaker Studios acquiring Frederator. So it's a Canadian company acquiring Frederator. So who actually started this initiative, though, is Michael Hirsch. Michael Hirsch, he was the original founder of Nelvana back in 1971. He was the co-founder of Teletoon. He founded Cookie Jar, which was the company that basically devoured Deke back in the mid-2000s. And until recently, he controlled DHX, and DHX is the company that they control Family Channel, Family Charged, all those few animation, or those few youth broadcasters that are on the air on Canadian airwaves right now that are not owned by Chorus. Chorus, of course, has almost the complete monopoly on imported American content. They own the Cartoon Network brand, they own Nick, they own Disney in Canada. They also run YTV and Teletoon now. So Michael Hirsch, he's kind of had his fingers in all this stuff over the years, and now he's headlining this new project, WoW Unlimited. So that's sort of the building blocks that have come together to make this company. They have a library that sort of seems to take from all that stuff. They have some Frederator titles. They have a selection of old Deke titles, some old Teletoon titles, and the classic mainframe titles. So, a little bits and pieces of stuff that Hirsch has been involved with over the years. So the WoW channel is being launched in collaboration with Bell. And this is actually their first time launching a youth channel. But I think one of the most significant things, and possibly the most significant thing behind this, is that Bell owns Crave. Crave is a major streaming platform. It was launched basically to be a competitor for Netflix. Arguably, when they first launched it, it was to just take streaming rights away from Netflix, but it's definitely evolved since then. And they are using Crave as the platform for WoW content. In fact, there's already a lot of stuff up there, which is, again, labeled as WoW World. And of note, Crave recently launched a new expanded version of their service. It's essentially the Canadian version of HBO Now. So for an extra charge, which totals like $20 a month, you actually can get full streaming and live stream access to HBO and Showtime content now. And this is probably going to greatly increase the number of people who are subscribed to Crave. And that's apparently already like 1.5 million people. So this expansion just kind of came out of nowhere. Both my girlfriend and I just noticed that Crave subscriptions had just materialized out of nowhere. It just kind of showed up in our systems. And we have separate subscriptions, so this happened independently. So if you have cable or satellite right now, there's a very good chance you actually have a Crave subscription and don't even realize it. This has kind of been their tactic for the most part.
So in other words, it isn't necessarily it isn't 1.2 million necessarily natural. It's 1.2 million, but sort of bubbling off the fact that if you have Bell Television or Bell Internet or something, you may also have Crave, kind of thing.
Most television providers have it, even Crave, even Bell's competitors, which is kind of weird. But a lot of people do use it because keep in mind they have. You can get it without a cable subscription. A lot of people seem to think you still need like a cable or satellite subscription to get it, which is not true. They've had like selections of HBO content for a while, and I think that has also been a big thing that's been driving them. So that's a really significant platform right there. And WoW is putting their content on Crave. They've already put a number of titles on there. And again, going back to this idea of Crave airing anime, just to emphasize, in Canada, we have not had a broadcaster making a dedicated effort to air anime since YTV's Bionics block ended back in 2010. Basically, as soon as Naruto ended, everything dried up. Now, if you had asked me back in 2012 if having anime on TV is still important, I would have said no. My opinion has definitely changed completely, though. We've seen the success of Toonami in the States, and right now, I don't know if you disagree with me on this, Karl, but Toonami is like still the most significant way of for more casual viewers to discover anime in the U.S. Would you think that's the case?
I'm of two mindsets on this. On one hand, there's still definitely an audience that has cable in the U.S. and that having that locked in block, very well professionally packaged, top-notch content, that definitely has a case, or definitely has a place for exposing new people to anime. Maybe not as valuable as it used to be because being in a late night Saturdays position still isn't the exposure that being in the afternoon was.
Yeah.
Conversely, the rapid proliferation, not necessarily of your niche services like Crunchyroll and then nicher still in Funimation and High Dive, but rather the access to anime on platforms like Prime, which everybody has, and Netflix, which everybody has. When you take you hear rumblings from like different news sites and stuff that like the things that are getting a lot of traffic in terms of anime news aren't necessarily the things that are airing on TV, certainly aren't the things that are on the niche streaming services, but are the things that are making their way to the mainline major streaming services. So those services, because if nothing else, they'll ignore the algorithm to try and suggest things to get people to try stuff so that they can ostensibly recoup that and see, well, maybe this will be sticky for people. There's a lot of discovery now happening on those platforms of anime titles, and that is becoming a major way in which people that are casual are still consuming animation in the United States and, of course, abroad, because when they are doing these things, they are doing these lock, stock, and barrel deals. To some extent, like there's still obviously a lot of value in linear. I think it's just, if nothing else, it provides value in linear as a concept, because if linear just becomes a homogeneous blob, that will only increase the attrition rates for it. but with the just pervasiveness of everybody having, often at least 2 streaming subscriptions, whether they realize it or not. And I say that because like not everybody catches, realizes that, hey, I've got a lot of free content on Prime. So that's one. And then people forget that like Netflix is a subscription thing. They just get used to like there's $10 a month coming out of their bank account, but they just assume that that's a thing that's there.
People forget that they pay for Netflix.
Yeah. I mean, I think
it's a very weird phenomenon.
Well, and I think the other thing that comes out of that is in talking to creatives, some of whom have been on this show, but just generally, there is now also a push in terms of original animation production in the United States to saying like, I'd rather do it for Netflix than a linear. And that's a massive shift. Like you would not have said that even necessarily 3 years ago. But because of, again, the fact that something can premiere on Netflix and have just as much cultural traction as it would have if it had premiered on Fox. That's a big shift. And the thing is, at least when you premiere on Netflix, there's not like, well, I hope they schedule the rest of my show eventually. Like the worst thing that can happen to you as a creative on Netflix or on Amazon is they take what was your 26 episode order and say like, we're going to drop 13 now and we'll drop 13 later in the year. That has changed the value of linear, both to the creative and to the consumer. And so it's hard to say that like, do we need WoW in Canada? Yeah, because having something like that has value. Is that even like, I've kind of come the other way. Like in 2012, I've probably been like, yeah, we need to have this on linear. Now, because of how much, if anything, because of how problematic at points linear television has been in terms of trying to stick to a brand or grow a brand, it's not as clear cut as it used to be. Like, I feel like there's a point where it's like, you gotta have linear too. Now I'm like, everybody's got this thing in their pocket and they're bored.
Yeah.
But to that end, I think there's still, and here's the thing that I think Canada's really actually lagging on, is that we don't have like YouTube TV and these kind of things that have kind of picked linear back up in the US. Mm-hmm. The sooner that Crave, and I think maybe this is that expansion with the HBO stuff as an experiment, because if like that didn't work, adding other Canadian channels wouldn't work. But if those linear live channels work, it's a lot easier to say like, for 35 or 40 a month, so we'll over the top add in the rest of a package. And that gets to be an incredibly compelling offering. And it's a lot easier to do that with, frankly, fresh channels. Like it's a way easier for them to launch WoW as a linear channel, launch it as an over-the-top linear channel via Crave, and then people are like, well, it's there, I've got it.
I still feel that having access to the programming on a linear platform is very important. Even if the number of cable satellite subscribers are dropping, which they are finally starting to. They're not dropping as fast as like people think they are. But we are seeing a decline. When we're talking about anime specifically, I would say that our lack of Toonami, you can compare it to the fact that we also don't have Hulu. We also don't have most of Crunchyroll's catalog available for free.
There's a lot of things here that, are limiting. It's like I said, it's one of those things where it's like, that means it's kind of part of, it's one of many things that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Like that needs to happen, but just as much as we need that to be available via not just a hardline subscription, but then being able to say like, that's part of an over the top PlayStation TV, YouTube TV kind of package. Like we need a Canadian version of that, like desperately. And I think it would probably, if anything, have more value at points, because for super remote areas, it makes way more sense just to run internet out there than to try and say like, we're going to run like a traditional cable line. Mm-hmm. So I think for a lot of like, I mean, granted, Canada's hyper urbanized, but this gets back to the other thing of like, another thing we need is digital subchannels.
Oh yeah.
So this all plays into like, it's like, I love that Bell is launching WoW. The smartest thing to do would be like, Bell owns fucking broadcast channels.
Yeah.
Make WoW at least for a month.
Yeah,
a digital subchannel.
A subchannel on every CTV broadcaster.
Exactly.
In Canada, that would be my pipe dream for sure.
It's not just a pipe dream. Just like at this point, if you're not going to do these other things, it's one of the gaps that's probably, barring that you have to, okay, there's technical setup that goes in that, but that may be still lower barrier to entry than your live streaming. Like trying to have Bell have a YouTube TV type offering is probably vastly more technically complex than saying stuff that's in a digital subchannel for CTV.
There's also regulatory things.
Well,
I think
sure.
a few there'd have to be quite a few license adjustments for that to work. Not that I don't think that's.
I think it would.
That is.
But the argument for that being in the public good is trivial because you're saying like we would like to give more content away for free that glues people to traditional broadcasting. That, by the way, because it's traditional broadcasting, if there's ever an emergency, you're definitely going to like see any sort of alerts or shit. Like there's a lot of there should be a pretty clean legalese type way of smoothing that through.
Anyway, WoW overall is they have some investor documents out that they list the target audience for this brand as kidults, which kind of goes back to that idea of millennials can't be adults; they have to be kind of graphed to the youth market to some degree. Ironically, like it's hard not to compare this whole effort to Viceland, which came and went in less than 2 years. Was specifically targeting part of the audience that WoW is apparently going to be
and they just
reaching
completely shot themselves in the foot. Like
I
mean, the one thing that they had that was really working for them, they couldn't retain. They had strong content. Well, they had strong content, but the thing is like, a lot of that stuff is being like the stuff like say all of the weed culture shows are also like something that YouTube does and does very well.
Those are all on Crave now, by the way.
Yeah. No, and all of the LGBT stuff also can fit very well on a YouTube or Netflix market. All of the food stuff, like you just put that on like food related YouTube channels to the point where it's like people who I would have like thought would have gotten a Viceland show are now just doing YouTube shows for like big YouTube channels.
Like they had strong content and all this great talent behind it, but their strategizing was just garbage. Like garbage on every front.
Well, I feel like they didn't empower the people who really needed to be empowered. Like you've got Nick Weidenfeld there, and he probably should have been making pretty much every decision that you could have him make conceivably, and I don't get that impression. And I don't even think he's with Vice anymore. So kind of tells the tale.
What is he up to now, anyway?
Well, I mean, obviously Neo Yokio Christmas special, which we can now talk about, but we will not derail this conversation. But I told you there's going to be more.
We'll see how it goes. I will watch it, absolutely. Yeah, but the thing is that like for all the waiting that we've had to do for this WoW platform that's launching, like they have a very interesting strategy.
Yeah. The content is still the part that I'd be paranoid about, because it's like having a deep old library is still not new stuff that people want to watch, and it's still not retaining creatives. Yeah. If you go on Crave right now, you can sample some of the WoW World kids stuff. It's only just the kids stuff right now. The thing is that I think I'm hoping there's a good chance that, if they get this anime thing going, that they will also have an dedicated anime section on Crave. This is something that Marnie had sort of alluded to in some of her public posts on Twitter. And in a way, that's the element here that I'm kind of anticipating most. I think that could be the biggest thing to come out of this. If you look at what WoW has right now, they do have one anime, actually the very first anime that Crave has launched, which is of course Spider Riders, which they pilfered from Toddcast's favorite.
Yep. There'll be a retrospective on that one eventually. If people aren't familiar, Crave was launched by Bell back about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was essentially a scheme to scoop up streaming licenses so that Netflix couldn't get them. Well, and they also scooped up a bunch of Amazon stuff early on too. They did. That was Shomi. That was Shomi. Shomi got the Amazon stuff. So there was another service called Shomi. That service was launched by Shaw and Rogers. So again, these new services, the only major streaming services that could emerge in Canada were from major telecom companies, because we live in a vertically integrated hellscape. Yeah, that's what you're getting, America. Enjoy, motherfuckers. Yeah. Now, here's the thing: is that these services weren't meant to be, things that function as streaming services. And no, they really were just helping.
were really hoping just to hold the clock back. They're like, we have a monopoly in Canada on television effectively between the three of us. So if we make bullshit fake streaming services, we can kill Netflix as a concept in Canada, and then no one will stream anything.
And that sure worked out great for them. That mentality led to the death of Show Me. Which has created an interesting situation now, because Crave is in a situation where they have to make Crave into something, and they're trying to. The problem is that when you browse around Crave and look at Crave, you'll realize that Crave is not built using the type of mentality that your regular popular streaming service is. It imitates Netflix on the surface level, like in the way everything is laid out. It doesn't use algorithms. The programming is basically just it has, if anything, more of a Hulu kind of mentality.
I'd almost compare it to like your also ran services like Viewster or Popcorn Flicks or Crackle. It's very
even Viewster and Crackle they're run with the mentality of trying to they much
leverage
content and gain content in the way that a streaming service would.
They understand what they're trying to do is be like, we can be free-ish alternatives to Netflix to hopefully eventually make ourselves worth something like Netflix. Yeah. They got a long road to hoe, but at least they're not coming from the I am a product from an incumbent telecom that owns 1/3 of a market.
Yeah. Side note, also, Crackle Canada shut down earlier this year, and not a lot of people noticed, but that's definitely another nail in the coffin for being able to do ad-based streaming services in Canada, which don't really seem to do too well, unfortunately. But with Crave, it's very much run by television people who are trying to make something look like a regular streaming service. And one of the consequences of that is that they don't have a lot of the type of content, or they're not going for the type of content that your regular competitive streaming service would try and go for. Of note, they have not even had any kids content until they added this WoW World stuff earlier.
Which is nuts. Like that's such a huge hole.
Going back again, Bell has never had a youth channel until now. So they're not even, the content they have is going to reflect what they own for television. And then like a few other things they grab on the side, mostly like catalog movies. But also the fact that it has never had anime, and Show Me also never had anime, is kind of astonishing, because I don't think there is any major successful streaming service that didn't make anime a part of its selection very early on in its life.
If nothing else, because it is, anime has often served a role with media that I think is understated in terms of bearing out the viability of a medium. Like, everybody's like, porn proves that a medium works. And I'm like, that's true. Anime as a niche thing that has an obsessive fan base can also prove whether a medium is viable. It was it was one of the few things in home video that worked well early on and supported Suncoast's long enough to exist that DVD could come along, and then anime again proves that this season box set stuff works.
What's Suncoast, Carl?
Suncoast was like, what do we have now in Canada? What's the thing?
Sunrise Records.
It's like Sunrise Records, except it was full of VHS stuff, and this ain't no kid stuff. Yeah. But more seriously, it's like, anime bore out DVD as a medium. Anime chose essentially Blu-ray as a medium in some ways, and anime was an early canary in the coal mine to the value of digitally internet-based video.
Yep.
It was such a revolution, and for our younger listeners, I really can't understate like what a massive shift DVDs already were, because you're going from like $40 for 2 episodes in your choice of dub or sub to $30 for 4 episodes in both. So that's immediately, like, strictly speaking, an 80 times gain. But then the bigger thing was like, hey, that show that used to take 3 years for you to ever see something of, or you had to get like an nth generation VHS that looked like a bad vaporwave music video that was poorly fan subbed by somebody. You could have this digital copy that was like initially sent to you via IRC, and that's anime built that market first. Before other piracy could even get off the ground, it was immediately there for fan subbing. So, like, if anime is on your platform, it means it is viable. is what I'm getting at.
Now,
the fact that it is absent from Crave
is conspicuous for sure. Now it's worth noting that going back to Marnie Shulman, who's the VP of the new WoW TV channel. Now she used to work for Show Me. In fact, it's right still in her Twitter handle. And she actually mentioned that Show Me at one point was interested or were considering getting Sailor Moon. Why they did not get Sailor Moon is something that just completely blows my mind to this day. And it really, the fact that they did not go for the new Sailor Moon dub from Viz, it just really shows that the mentality going behind a lot of decisions with that company, and probably not too different over at Crave.
I think Show Me would have had a very different, would have been a lot more viable if they had gotten dubs going on it, because they would have been like, shit, that's a place where you could do that. Okay.
Yeah. And from what she said on Twitter, she is still interested in Sailor Moon. Also, one notable thing that if you've done any reading on WoW TV, chances are you may have seen a lot of people mentioning the Ocean dub of Dragon Ball Kai. That's because Ocean Kai, because that's the folks down at Kaizenshu have been a little vocal about communicating to Marnie that they want to see that Ocean Dragon Ball Kai dub airing on television or just being released to the public in some form. And she actually, again, going back to how incredibly transparent she's been, she's more or less confirmed that they're in talks to get it. Whether or not that will be finalized, whether or not any of this will be finalized or go through can't be said.
And that's the other thing that's difficult is just like,
yeah.
And this is something that to a certain extent, this is the limit, the Canadian publishers have a limitation on, or Canadian broadcasting entities have is like what they can get, what they can settle a deal for. And that depends somewhat on, that requires not just people interested like Marnie, but she needs the support of the rest of her organization. And it's all too fresh to say that that's there. It's great when you hear Sabert saying like CR is our model, because you think like, shit, that's a global game and that could be really valuable.
Yeah.
And I want to just touch on this really quick. It could be very valuable for Canadian creatives, like let alone us getting anime in Canada. If WoW plays a global game, WoW is tied into Rainmaker. Rainmaker is a Canadian studio. Theoretically, this means eventually WoW content gets pushed out through Verve and out into hopefully not just the United States, but as Verve tries to emulate CR's model, longer term, these things can start to, this gets Canadian content out into the world and provides WoW drive to make good Canadian content and not just Canadian content for the tax credit. So it would be really great if these things can, they assemble all the parts that you need, one of which is probably getting anime on Crave and getting anime on the linear network, which means securing these harder to track down Canadian dubs at points.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think everyone is kind of hoping for that kind of two-way relationship. Whether or not it's going to be anyone will want to go through with pulling it off is the big question. It is still kind of an ideal to a big extent.
There's also going to be to a certain extent of if this doesn't work. Let's say this doesn't work. WoW ends up just sort of being like a studio. Basically feeding other streaming services, and doesn't manage to launch something so much of their own, or it doesn't stick. Crave doesn't stick. We're then, in Canada and in many markets are going to be facing the same problem of, well, I hope Netflix wants the tax credits to then produce a cartoon or whatever up here. Like that's a lot more tenuous, than there is at least somebody who's treating Canada as a first-class citizen, as creating a broadcast network with one of the three major companies up here. Essentially, it's not just suggests, but demands.
Another thing to keep in mind is that WoW is very much partially American as well.
Yeah.
They made that Castlevania show that's on Netflix right now. That is a show. Assuming that Netflix does not have the broadcast rights to that, assuming that the WoW channel has a full-fledged, millennial adult targeted block late at night, I am almost certain that Castlevania show is probably going to show up there at some point, and that would be great.
Well, and that's yet another angle for them is there's a lot of these things where either Netflix doesn't have the broadcast rights or they're entirely willing to broadcast things and syndicate things after the fact. And that Castlevania being a great, if you can be the one that picks up that as the core of your adult animation block that's anime centric in Canada, and you get the broadcast rights to that, the syndication rights to that, even if that's an after the fact thing rather than a direct lock, though you'd think it would be a lot easier for them to say like, hey, we need this up here and it's really just going to be like an ad for your shit anyways. You do what you say what you need to say and to make that deal stick, because it would be a great start, and it's something that again can be built on. Keep in mind that supposedly the same creative is being lined up for a Zelda series possibly.
Well, we'll see about that. Everyone always likes to talk about the possibility of a Legend of Zelda series.
But the thing is like if Castlevania has done so well, and even the Anna Twitter, skeptical Anna Twitter has been very warm on it. Hopefully that means if nothing else, they can produce their way into this, and then you'd be like, well, we've got this much stuff, but if we can pick up a couple licenses, then it's a real meaty piece of television.
Yeah, and keep in mind, there's also the risk with WoW Unlimited kind of having like an American stream of content production than a Canadian stream of content production. Because on one hand, we've got Castlevania coming out of Frederator. Other hand, we've got Reboot the Guardian Code coming out of the Rainmaker side.
The flip side is that it got attention.
On that note, I know in a previous episode I said that we'd certainly be talking about Reboot the Guardian Code again. I take that back. We are not. It is not worth anyone's time. It's just watch episode 10 just for the sheer shock value of that one.
And then just watch Code Lyoko to get basically the same concept better executed.
Or Lawnmower Man.
There's dead ass gotta be a Lawnmower Man Code Lyoko crossover film.
But anyway, the linear portion is really important. I do think that despite the fact that WoW would be a channel that no one is used to watching on like a Teletoon or a YTV or something.
I just really hope that Saber can bring the same kind of marketing prowess that came into marketing early MTV to WoW. Cause and I want people to think about WoW in that kind of context. It's like that guy who launched MTV and built all that hype around it. I want my MTV. Hopefully he can get WoW, I want WoW or something going, because otherwise this is such a crazy thing to do.
Also Hirsch. He's gonna make it like he could make this like the more well-known brands we know in Canada for the existing stuff.
And vastly more importantly, he should have his roots go back so far. He should have the Rolodex, literally, of numbers of how to get this through whatever, on the right desks with the right people. Like there's a power team combination there that I want to stress that I hope, like again, if you can't get those two to launch the network in Canada, I almost wonder if that's it for new linear networks in Canada.
Well, this might be the big last test for that actually. But here's another thing. Also with the Ocean Dragon Ball Kai dub, that's the kind of thing that has the potential to bring international attention to the block as well. Like, look, this weird production that we've heard about for years is on the airwaves. I don't know what's going to be like as an actual presentable production in the end, but it's gonna bring attention.
On the airwaves would be great. If it's on Crave, that might be even better, because
that's not going to be on. Worth pointing out, Dragon Ball Kai has never streamed anywhere. That's actually one that Funimation never even managed to get the streaming rights to Kai. So if they do get that one, I would expect it to be broadcast only. Yeah.
So in other words, so that's the probable one. The impossible would actually generate all the hype in the universe when would actually be getting it on Crave.
Yeah. In my personal optimistic outlook on this is that if they get this anime block going and synergize it with Crave, like I really hope if they do look into Sailor Moon, they'll also look into other Viz stuff and finally close that Viz gap in Canada. If you are not Canadian and not familiar with this, you might not know that a large portion of Viz's catalog is not streaming in Canada and has not streamed in Canada for many years. Ranma 1/2 has actually never been available streaming here, which is quite ludicrous. And, if they get that relationship going, I think that could be a a good opportunity to finally fix that gap and get that content available. Not all broadcast, of course, but certainly streaming.
Well, I mean, anything would be better than old Neon Alley.
Let's not talk about Neon Alley. One thing worth pointing out, though, functionally with Crave, is that every video stream only supports one audio track and a closed captioning track, and its closed captioning is like, we're talking like 90s white on black.
It's like closed captioning. It is closed captioning.
It is literally closed captioning, not subtitles.
No, and I mean, by the way, that's another tell that they're not super, like, it's another little technological nod that, like, the way that they've set this stuff up is not modern.
I mean, to be fair, I think even Hulu does separate streams for its dubs and subs. So
yeah, but I think that's also because Hulu has the same problem. It's a television service by television companies, as opposed.
Funimation also does too. Worth pointing out.
Well, and people don't like, and that's why people are really sad that Funimation is leaving Verve, because Funimation's app
they have easily the worst streaming app of the three major anime streaming apps. So, which
by the way, is an amazing feat considering, like, High Dive is really, really new.
And not designed by Sony. It's kind of, actually, High Dive is considerably better than the Funimation app. It's very,
well, I mean, they launched with like simulcast live chat, which is genius.
But, you know, at the end of the day, even though there's that potential to have like the Viz catalog and like the stuff like Capellion or Lagrange Flower of Rene and those few titles that are just not available in Canada for whatever reason, finally just getting them on there. I mean, the most important thing is getting the dubbed content on there.
Oh yeah, the dubbed content is everything. And the other thing is there's a lot of Viz dubbed content that I think, if you're really going to reach for this new block, could be really compelling. Like, this gets back into the old action stuff is cool, but no one's got the cojones to do like a shoujo block, and who's got some like top fucking shelf shoujo content is Viz, you know?
I don't think they have Nana anymore, unfortunately.
Oh, that's right. I think think that has lapsed.
Yeah. Someone will get it again, and hopefully not redub it with LA voice actors.
Oh, that would be such a waste, because it's a pretty solid Canadian dub, and it's also it's one of the shows that benefits, like, it's like, as with all Canadian dubs, the longer the show is, the better the dub will turn out, because the more the cast has a chance to really get a grasp of the characters.
Exactly. But I think it's most important to get that dubbed content on there.
Oh yeah.
Because again, like, getting stuff on Crave.
Yeah.
Because I strongly suspect that, you know, you have like over 1.5 million people have Crave in Canada. That number's probably going to grow. The number of those 1.5 people who actually use the service is probably also going to grow now that it's got the full HBO library as well. Yeah. When you subscribe to the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But I suspect that the overlap between people who have Crunchyroll subscriptions and the people who have Crave subscriptions is extremely small. Crave is
I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah. Crave is a hugely mainstream thing.
It's a super casual thing. Like, you have to, you cannot.
Extremely casual. And I draw the comparison to Hulu. Hulu, even though you have to pay a subscription for it in the States now and it's a lot less popular, it is a very casual kind of site.
Yeah, it's aimed at like people who watch TV, not like yes, hardcore like television consumers use it because that's where they can get stuff, but that's not their target demographic isn't like TV Twitter. Their target demographic is like your mom and your dad. And that's Crave's demographic as well. But the thing is at the moment, the thing that Crave probably doesn't have is like younger viewership. I don't know what the demographic breakdown is, but here's the thing. Younger viewers, and this gets into like the value of linear versus thing, is like, I have a feeling a lot of younger viewers right now, they're discovering anime through, I mean, the States, Crunchyroll has a free tier, so that helps. But
another major thing we're lacking here.
Yeah, another major thing we're lacking.
Another like casual avenue.
Another casual app. Well, if nothing else, it's an avenue that means that if on the off chance some kid hears about like My Hero Academia at school, they can find a legal stream from the jump.
I think that in Canada, more people are finding anime through piracy.
Yeah.
Or a higher percentage of people.
And the thing is, especially young people, they're probably, if they're being introduced to it, it's like they're probably, I wouldn't be surprised if a huge piece of it is a whatever what generation is, last generation, whatever you want to call it. The younger than millennials, the actual teenagers and tweens are watching like a Let's Play on YouTube. And they're doing a sponsor break to be like, this Let's Play is brought to you by Crunchyroll. Watch da-da-da on Crunchyroll. If they're lucky, it's something that's currently running. So maybe they're getting to see like the last 13 episodes of it.
Yeah.
And then if they have, other than that, then it's either piracy, like general piracy, or they're watching some like crazy mirrored version on like YouTube or Dailymotion or something at best. So that is like, suddenly that can become like those sponsor breaks. Like there's popular Canadian YouTubers, like some of have been on this show. If they can say like, hey, watch My Hero Academia or something on Crave, that's how that closes the circle. So if WoW can get some of this content onto Crave, that closes the whole circle, because then Crave can be like, we're gonna get that young audience by doing tie-ins with some gamer channel, and then the circle closes. Until then, it is this weird gap where it's like, if it's not there, the Gen Xers can't get at it. It can't be marketed through these other channels to younger people. And the linear is just part of like establishing its like, I think, cultural value after a certain point.
Now this gets to why I'm kind of two minds on this whole thing. Crave, I would argue, is not just mainstream. It sort of represents like the main body of like the Canadian media or broadcast or whatever you want to call it ecosystem of content right now. Obviously you have Netflix, which probably more people are watching.
Well, I also just don't know how, like hour for hour, how much Canadian content is on Crave versus Netflix. And that would be an interesting metric that I have no clue about.
I really don't know. And in a way, it doesn't even really come down to Canadian content. It just comes down to like what media entity in general has people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Crave, from a Canadian perspective, would be the biggest thing. And having anime on that service, or like just getting niche titles in there in general, will go a long way in, just getting more exposure for that kind of thing. And I think it's
also
really
keeping it viable.
Anime and keeping it viable, and making the media landscape more interesting and more diverse again.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
or
otherwise you're really leaning on the fact that Netflix is an international player, that is the casual international player.
Yeah.
Being the gateway to that. And that's fine, because like Netflix is like, honestly, they've put money behind some really great shows. Really great anime. Like I watched Dragon Pilot and I'm like, that's a really darn good show. And it's also one that's like deeply, deeply, deeply Japanese culturally too. So it's like, it's got a lot going for it that, that's like beyond just being like a good anime. I'm like, man, people will learn something about Gifu from this show, like legit. That's one show, and there's just so much more anime. Like if Netflix had like Crunchyroll's catalog, I wouldn't worry as much. Netflix will never probably have Crunchyroll's catalog, and if anything, with Crunchyroll saying we're getting into original production, I'll see how long that whether the US side of that like gets to stick around under AT&T. I have a feeling if that's not an instant hit, I think it's going to do well. But if it's not an instant hit, I worry that AT&T will try and cut that early. I think their attempt at sort of getting a Japanese linear vertical integration will actually be really beneficial for Japanese animators, because they'll just be in a position to be like, here's money, no bullshit, no middlemen, no production committee, don't starve in Tokyo.
Well,
for fuck's sake.
We'll see about that.
I hope so. But on that basis, though, Crunchyroll will always probably have more anime content and anime style content than Netflix can ever dream of. They will never be Netflix will never be a niche competitor in that space, which means if that stuff isn't coming in through, if the stuff that Crunchyroll doesn't touch doesn't come in through other local streaming services. I mean, the other problem is like there's always going to be players that don't bother to play an international game. Hulu, I don't think is ever going to, until it's demanded of it, will not play an international game. If this stuff is going to get to casual viewers, more of it needs to show up on casual platforms somehow. Yeah. And so that means that the local casual platforms, which in this case is Crave, and is in this case some sort of channel, so that the hyper casual viewer, the person flipping through channels or who just wants some TV on in the background, can to get into stuff. Yeah, WoW is like, it's a huge bet, and it's one that like I said, CanCon getting global exposure hinges on, and also global content getting better exposure in Canada hinges on. frankly.
And there's also the whole question of, is Crave the kind of thing that could become an international player as well if they expanded?
And I feel like that's like, if Crave really wants to like make shit work, Canada is essentially a media oligopoly. You have three companies that have effectively 95% of the content, with the other remaining being in the CBC. And the CBC is probably in some ways going to be better positioned to play globally, just because.
Probably, yeah.
But the thing is like, Canadian content companies kind of have to like fish or cut bait. Like, they sort of say like, we're going to either become vassals of, we're going to be production studios, essentially, groups of production studios under these umbrellas, but we're production studios that are ultimately, maybe we've got something here locally. Maybe we can sort of force that, but maybe not even that. But for the most part, if this stuff gets further exposure or better funding, or we want to recoup more stuff from it, we're selling to one of X companies, right? We're selling to Netflix, we're selling to Verve, as that becomes more of an international player, and as that becomes AT&T's international play. We're selling to Amazon, or, we're selling to like one of these handful of things. And it's like, I think it's way better to swing hard now and try and say like, hey, no, we're going to anchor this thing with Canadian content, and then we'll try and get as many other licenses as we can in here and compete. Because otherwise, you're already going to be seceding a lot of the talent that can make your streaming platform just nice enough to use in Canada.
When you're comparing the international competition landscape to the one specifically in Canada, it's very difficult to reconcile like the scale of things like competition and oligopolies. Yeah, and again, this comes back to why I'm of two minds on this, because on one hand, I hate Bell. Bell is the company that wants to censor the internet. They want to destroy net neutrality.
None of these fucking companies that we're talking about are good companies with Canadian telecoms.
No, absolutely not.
But then we're literally saying, it's like, I hope they get competition from a shitty American telco.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're just like, fuck.
That's the Canadian mentality for telecom competition.
No, it's like, we were like dead ass, like,
Verizon will be our savior.
Well, like, dead ass were like, man, it would be nice if like Verizon or T-Mobile bought like Mobilicity instead of Rogers. And like, the fact of the matter is that actually technically would have been something, because it would have put the fear of God into the Canadian companies a little. Yeah. But it's still not healthy, because that just turns Verizon, which is already, I think, technically an international telco. Certainly T-Mobile, obviously, again, Deutsche Telekom, or SoftBank. Let's say SoftBank bought it. Again, that's Japan's, like, they don't, as interesting or compelling as a North American wide telco would be from some aspects, never roam again. At the same time, you're like, and there'll be three of them and you'll be fucked by all of them.
Yes, staving that off is probably in our best interest, honestly. But with Bell specifically, the thing is that Crave is slowly morphing into something that's not only mainstream, but it's very dangerously close to just becoming a replacement for television in general, especially with now that they've launched like essentially an HBO subscription that you can get.
If they add more linear channels, it will be an over-the-top option.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Bell will be literally the only people in Canada with the over-the-top option. And if it's viable, maybe that will suddenly draw in competition. But again, not competition from Rogers, not competition from Shaw, competition from overseas players, PlayStation TV, YouTube TV, and that gets back into, CTRC may say, like, if you want to run your service here, you've got to license Canadian channels. Okay, fine. Doesn't matter if they're not prioritized or not watched. Yeah. Like, it quickly could become its own mess.
These things are not regulated by the CRTC.
Yes.
At least not.
So really, it would just be about cutting the content deals then to say, I'm YouTube. We want to launch YouTube TV in Canada. We'd like to stream CTV. And it's interesting that hasn't been put together. Is Canada simply, again, too sort of small a market? It's just still viewed as a leftover by these players? Or is there also just an aspect from our three companies saying, like, the last thing we're going to let into Canada is your over-the-top service. We're not going to sell you for any price.
That's the reason Hulu can't get in here, is because Hulu's bread and butter is the streaming rights to American network shows. Those are all owned by Global CTV, City, all those broadcasters, and their vertically integrated telco overlords as well. And that's basically why it can't gain any traction here. But the thing is that so right now, this would be different if Show Me were still around, because then Shaw and Rogers would have that as their streaming outlet. Right now, Shaw controls this the other half, essentially most of the other half of the oligopoly with Chorus. If they had Show Me, they would have a streaming platform. Right now, there is no streaming infrastructure at all for Chorus. The funny thing is about these oligopolies or partial monopolies is that it is one thing to acquire and amass this monopoly. It is quite another thing to actually run it. And we're in a situation now where Shaw is not capable of running their partial monopoly with Chorus, and it's completely in shambles right now.
Oh, certainly from the media side. Like the problem is this is the paranoia that I think should be there in the States with regards to AT&T's acquisition of the Warner stuff is, okay, they've got all this stuff.
Yeah.
Warner's got its problems. Is AT&T going to fix them? Or is AT&T through intent or neglect going to make them worse? So far, one can say it's like, oh, it sucks that they're killing Filmstruck. It sucks that they're killing Drama Fever. I'm like, if they are in a position where they can retain the rights to that content, retain the relevant talent from that, but then condense those offerings into platforms where people will watch them more, if by killing Filmstruck, they put all that library into HBO so that classic films, instead of being in a ghetto, are visible, that might be a good move. If by killing Drama Fever, they put all that stuff underneath the CR umbrella where, again, it's more visible, that could be a smart move. On the other hand, they could do things where they just kill stuff, lose a bunch of talent to competitors, start ceding ground to them, and you have leveraged the shit out of your company to buy media companies you have ruined. And that's kind of where Shaw is right now.
Yeah. Now here's the thing I'm concerned about. So there's no streaming infrastructure for any of that stuff. The popular example that I bring up a lot is like Cartoon Network and Adult Swim. Cartoon Network specifically is not streaming. You can't stream that content anywhere. And it's mainly because like there's no outlet for it through Chorus. If Shaw and Rogers eventually cave and just sort of sublicense their content to Bell to put on Crave, that would be essentially Bell having the full monopoly that they really want. Because earlier this year, Shaw was trying to sell Chorus. They could not find a person or a company that was willing to buy it. And it was often cited that the only company that, probably could buy it would be Bell, but they can't because that is literally the only thing that competition laws will prevent them from being able to do.
Yeah.
It's like the one step they can't make. If they can get Shaw and Rogers to get stuff on Crave, then they get that monopoly they want on a platform. My bet is
there's still limitations on that though, because while I would be very surprised if the way that the stuff is written up in terms of what they've licensed from U.S. content holders, that they can then sublicense that again to another Canadian company. Yeah. I think the possibility of Crave soaking up all the CanCon that's not CBC. Yeah. Very possible. And even then, CBC does stuff through production companies, so even some of the CBC stuff, the CBC might at points say like, well, we can put this on our platform and give it value, or we can take a bag right now, having had sublicensed it to Crave. And that's another risk. It's one that's a little bit more unlikely, but I mean, it's certainly possible that for any original Canadian content that Rogers or Chorus Shaw produce, they're like, fuck it. If it's on Crave, it's being monetized somehow. I mean, that's how we get into this media balkanization stuff from the start, was there's a lot of like, I can't set up a network in your country, but I can sell it to you. And you get in that habit of like, that's a quick bag. That's quick money. And so you'll balkanize your content just because it got you $500,000 now rather than you making $2 million over the next 3 years. And so long as that incentive's there, that's also an incentive towards monopolization, because you say like, this guy's handing out money. I'm going to get that money right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have like CBC and their gem services, kind of a little balance of power, but it's like, it's not enough. You have the possibility that Crave is going to become this all-encompassing monster. Here's why I'm of two minds on it, because this is a kind of a really nightmare kind of scenario on one hand, but if it is the center of attention to that degree, and, anime has a place on there, that is just so significant, undeniably significant for anime in general, and for any other niche content they get as well.
I mean, we're really getting now to that, like, the big questions that people foresaw 2 decades ago that are like, CRTC is going to have to work this out, and in the States, the FCC has to work out, like, well, what is competitiveness in this market where strictly speaking, it's like, I mean, and it's incredibly beneficial to independent creators. And I say that not as obviously, from the much more simple overhead of a music perspective. It's still really great for me to be say like, I pay $25 a year. I can upload all the music I want to literally every streaming service, including super niche ones like KK Box, which is, I think, like, again, something SoftBank owns that streams music in Asia. Like, I get all this access as an independent creator very egalitarianly. How that translates into the much more complex world of television production and television distribution, unfortunately, we have yet to see the television equivalent to DistroKid, where an independent creator or a studio can say, like, I'm going to pay X a year for access to then have this thing be up on all the major streaming platforms. And maybe that's long term where we need to get, but what that looks like and the legal frameworks that surround that, I think just don't exist yet.
Okay, just to sort of summarize everything, we're in a situation where we were looking at anime.
Yeah.
That discoverability potential is really low.
Current.
In Canada. Now, WoW Unlimited, to clarify, and I should have said this at the beginning, we don't know for sure that there will be anime on the station. It seems
they're trying really hard, and I almost wonder if that's part of why you have the April launch. Is they understand the value of that.
My suspicion of why they have the April launch is because there's a condition in their license that all the content they run between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. has to have descriptive video service in it, which is going to be interesting because I think a lot of the content they acquire and produce probably doesn't have that. This is, 100% my speculation, but I think maybe they have to produce some of that or get their hands on some of that stuff in order to fill those time slots. But, if they did, hopefully they get anime. If they do go for those major titles like the Dragon Ball Kais and the Sailor Moons and the Inuyashas, I don't know what the expenses for producing descriptive video service is, but I think it would be a good investment for highly rerunnable content like that. Also, if they were to get anime like Pop Team Epic, I would absolutely want to watch that show with descriptive video. In fact, I think a lot of people would.
The man turns the page and then says, "Hell shake Yano."
If they did that, they would have to get like one female descriptive video narrator and a male descriptive video narrator and get them to redo the episode.
You are fucking genius.
That's the kind of thing that would create publicity for this.
That would be
I would love to watch that.
Would be amazing publicity. Like, I mean, that's the kind of thing. This is so rarely are Americans jealous of the content Canada gets. It's the kind of thing where we can go back to very specific examples when Canada was getting new seasons of the cartoons it was making before the U.S. So that would be one of those moments, wouldn't it? Maybe people would be like, oh man.
But I'm hoping that they get anime going. I hope they get a good block going. Actually, I'm curious to know, Karl, just as an anime fan, what are your hopes? What would your hopes and expectations be from, this possibility that we're going to have anime on WoW and Crave?
It's such a tricky thing. I think that from the Crave side, I want them to just get that catalog as big as possible, as quick as possible. Because like I said, that discoverability thing is real, and it's already affecting what gets traffic on animation news websites. Like stuff that's on Netflix gets way more traffic than its contemporaries on Crunchyroll. Even the big hits on Crunchyroll still don't necessarily get the traffic that like a Netflix show will get or even an Amazon show will get. So there's real value in discoverability there that needs to be hammered out. So like there, I just want everything. I want everything they can get their hands on. I don't care if it's complete garbage type stuff. Frankly, some of the stuff I hate, I know moves discs and gets views. So I can't be picky on that. They could pick like the fan service stuff that they can peel off of Sentai and Funimation, and I'd still be like, great. I'd still be like, it'd be
okay with that.
Yeah, it'd be like, fine, that's something. And it's not like you can't say like, it's not like you can't say that like Amazon and Netflix don't play in that pool and don't understand its value. But, for what goes on the block, like obviously it's the more, like Kai would be a major win, Sailor Moon would be a major win, especially because those are the kind of things that again, like, oh man, we'd love to run that new thing. And like, even the, I think that it's been said that like Toonami couldn't pick up the new Sailor Moon. Like, and so to get that is a big ha-ha for Canada.
It's funny that they couldn't get that. I have my suspicion is that I think the broadcast rights are tied to the streaming rights, or rather, I think Hulu might actually have the broadcast rights.
That's
my theory.
It would explain why these things, and put it this way, it would explain. It's not like it's a problem that they would be unfamiliar with, in as much as, wow, you can't seem to get the broadcast rights for this show that Crunchyroll has streaming. We're the same parent company. Magically, we have them. So it's like, so those kind of deals do exist. So it would be really nice if, and that could also be like the big kibosh is like they have that for North America actually for Hulu. So like we don't know that it could be the exact same thing that screws it for Canada.
Wouldn't be the first time.
I think there's a lot of there's so much great Gundam stuff that's been dubbed in Canada, and Gundam has historically done very well in Canada. However popular Gundam was in America, Gundam was popular enough in Canada that in a single gas station town in eastern British Columbia, I saw Gundam Wing merchandise. That is next level.
Getting something like Wing would be obvious. If they could...
if Wing's been remastered, right?
Oh, yeah, it's in
HD.
That'd be beautiful. On Blu-ray now.
That'd be good.
If they could wrangle the Ocean dub of Gundam Seed, because that Ocean dub of Gundam Seed is being included in the super special edition of the Blu-ray coming out. If they could wrangle that version out of Sunrise to get that streaming up here, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
I just make the argument that this had a big cultural impact in Canada. People would love to see this version of the dub they can see the new dub if they buy the Blu-ray.
So you can start to say all right, run the classics, and we'll use that as an excuse to get into the newer stuff. I like IBO. I think it's a dope.
Yeah.
I think it's such a. I think relative to a lot of other I think it's a good balance between highfalutin political fantasy Gundam, but also just but these guys are basically Mars oil roughnecks. There's so much more human characters than we normally get out of our Gundam leads. They're much closer to the 8th MS team. These guys are just in the middle of some bullshit.
Yeah.
And I think that plays really well. I think I'd like to see that. Like I said, there's always that big dream ask of run shoujo content on and not just magical girl content, deep cut shoujo content on a linear station.
I wouldn't mind seeing them grab that Toei dub of Pretty Cure season 1.
It would be. I'd if they do that though. I want it with a restored master, because it looks the copies that you can watch of the sub are just brutal.
Yeah, you also have to remember that there's in this age where there's so much anime being produced, it feels like there's less shoujo than ever.
Well, I think it's also you're not by shoujo here. I should probably say it's run some josei ass shit on this channel. Actually, that's really what I mean. At the heart of it is
just run Wakakazake, just subtitled right on the TV blog. They should do that.
There is so much good unbroadcasted HD, for that matter, josei content that you could start to tap that I would think would be for broadcast rights cheap.
Well, we don't know, we don't really know that kind of thing. But,
I would hope. I put it this way, if they are sane, which I of course will never count on. I
think that they're probably going to, as far as content that runs on TV, they'll probably, for the most part, except for, stuff like Dragon Ball Kai, which they're not going to, I don't think there are going to be streaming rights for that one. They're probably going to want to leverage stuff that they have streaming. It would be neat if it were possible for them to do some, because the thing about Toonami is that they're very tricky with the way they do licensing. They often license stuff just for a one-time airing to reduce costs, and that not only keeps things cheap, it also keeps generating new interest in the block, because it's always fresh, it's always new. Well, and a lot of that stuff you don't need to run more than once. It would be neat if they had some kind of deal with Crave. I don't know if this is possible, but license a show for streaming, but also as a condition of that license, also allow a one-time airing for each episode.
Yeah, no,
which would be adequate for most content, honestly.
No, there's a lot of content there's
your My Hero Academias, your Dragon Ball Supers. Obviously, you'd want to be able to rerun that stuff over and over again. But most other content you would really only need to run once.
Oh wait, there's stuff that they don't. There's stuff that I hope they don't run at all. Black Clover. If they can, if it's all they can get, I'll take it. That there's things that I'd be like, it'd be nice if they could pass on that. No, there's definitely things that would be really good if they can get it in there. I mean, the main thing is I hope it doesn't look backwards too much. It's like, yeah, it'd be cool if you ran Cowboy Bebop. Maybe eventually. Don't launch with that. It's old. I want it to launch with fresh stuff that makes people wish they had the channel, not just here, but overseas. Like, you want this thing ideally to be so rad that people are envious of it. And that's not just going to be done. That's the value of the Ocean Kai dub, is it's something like, shit, wish we could have that. So you got to think of, I'm trying to think in those terms. It's like, man, what's something that Toonami hasn't gotten? What's something that American television hasn't tackled? And that's why I immediately gravitate to Josei, because it's just completely untouched. Yeah. But I'm like, okay, you've got a Crunchyroll connection. Have Fred talk to Miles and see if you can get an airing of Yuri on Ice. That would be boom. Fucking mic drop.
If we're naming individual titles, I think that Land of the Lustrous would be a fantastic one
that would
to
be
run
so
TV.
Fucking sick. It's just, I mean, so I marathoned that recently, because my wife is still in Japan for another 5 days, and I'm very lonely, very sad. So I marathoned Land of the Lustrous while I was getting over jet lag, and holy shit, it's got action that is top shelf, yet the vibe emotionally is on almost like a Habanero tip. It's just, damn, that is a good show. I mean, I can't put it on any of my top lists or anything yet, because I need, any of these things I gotta think about these days because I'm old. But shit, I'm almost sad that I wasn't, able to follow that because of when it was running, because it just sort of so hits the, I would have wanted to be on the online discussion on that one. But yeah, no, it's a great show. Yeah. And again, okay, so Amazon ostensibly streams that.
It was sublicensed from Sentai. Sentai that's fully theirs. And they got a dub starting soon.
And I hope Sentai is better.
I hope they get Sentai stuff. I hope that Sentai isn't left out of the dust.
Well, I mean, it's one of these things where it's I hope Sentai doesn't say well, now we've got High Dive, we have Verve, and that will be our international foray. I think there's a lot of value, and I think this is something that I don't know to what extent Sentai has hangovers from ADV, because we now know very explicitly from recent tweets from Jason DeMarco that there was a lot of ADV content that they wanted proactively and just simply were not, ADV said nah. So I don't know to what extent Sentai has, I mean, they've run some stuff on Toonami, right? There's been a couple of Sentai titles. Mm-hmm. But I just don't know if they still kind of have some of ADV's TV compulsions. I hope they have learned that man, if ADV didn't have a TV compulsion, there'd probably still be an ADV. Because I think that's a huge part of why Funimation was able to stick around. Because if nothing else, that's just extra money in the bag. But it also raises the prominence and value of your brand. So back to the value of linear television. So yeah, there's a lot of Sentai stuff that would be just dope. And here's the other thing. I want to see this new channel, understand that it runs for 24 hours a day, and therefore there are times where you can just be we're going to run weird shit and try stuff. I want this channel to be bold, because that is actually missing. That actually then might have not just value in Canada, but be the basis for value internationally.
Obviously they should be discerning for whatever they get for the station, but
Crave has everything that they can, whatever deals they can cut.
I agree with you also that they should, not just make it a Canadian version of Toonami. I'd like to see a more a different angle, probably again more of a Josei-ish.
I'm also just,
I think even Land of the Lustrous fits into. It's technically seinen, but I think it kind of fits into that mold you mentioned too. But
it's just in such a different headspace than anything that would have run on Toonami. I feel like Toonami should run it. There's, Lord knows there's enough action in it.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be great.
And it's super brutal, and it's weird. Shattering gems, but not in a Steven Universe way.
You made the forbidden comparison, Karl.
I did it.
Even though, let's face it, the audiences for those two shows are extremely similar, even if you can argue that the shows themselves are not.
You know what it was? That was absolutely, there is in no small way Land of the Lustrous is also just methadone for while you wait for more Steven Universe.
Anyway, I think we should probably cut ourselves off before we start making fantasy schedules.
Oh. That's the problem is I could easily do that for WoW, and from both their library and what I would pray they get.
for all we know, this April, like, the station could, like, completely fall apart between now and then. The entire, like, fabric of society could fall apart between now and then.
Vote if you. I mean, this is coming out after people have voted, but you better have voted.
We're recording this the night before the U.S. midterms. So just to wrap up, I will reiterate again, even though that this upcoming WoW channel has the enormous influence and pockets of Bell behind it.
And two genius, legendary execs.
I still urge you, if you have a cable provider that doesn't carry Comedy Gold, which is the station that will be turning into the WoW station, or WoW TV, or WoW World, or whatever they call it, I urge you to contact your provider and tell them you want to see the station on the day it launches, hopefully, next year. It's really important, because we want to make sure that this reaches as many people as possible. Linear is important. The linear is going to feed into the streaming. The streaming's even more important. The streaming could feed into more linear. Maybe maybe anime will succeed. Maybe they'll try putting it on, I don't know, space or something.
And you know what? But, maybe it also gets more Canadian content, which means Canadian animators, writers, producers out to the world, and gets us less dependent on tax credits and more just exposed and letting these creatives be, like, awesome. So there's so many important things behind this channel that I don't even, as much as I love anime, I want to stress also that, like, cause, you know, you and I have friends who are animators and shit here in Canada, and, like, this could be a big thing for them if, instead of it just being chorus is everything, there's a real second gravity, cause otherwise, you know, monopolies.
Anyway, I think we'll call it quits there. Thanks for tuning into Zun Canada. Karl, where can the folks at home find you on social media and other places on the internet?
You can find me at KarlRolson.com. Also my Twitter handle, also my Facebook handle. You can also find me at ultraclystron.com, and where my Bandcamp resides. You can find all my music on Spotify. I just dropped a new record. It's drum bass. Sounds like the kind of music that underpins Toonami, so you probably, if you're listening to this, might enjoy it. And I hope to have another project out sometime next year, as I often do.
And Karl, of course, is responsible for the theme song for this show, which you can find on his album Packet Flood in all the places that he just named to you right now. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge, or email zonandcanada@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, or whatever your podcast app of choice is. Leave a rating or review if you have a chance, because that really helps with visibility for the show, especially on Apple Podcasts.
Like and subscribe.
Yep. If you know anyone else who might like this show, please recommend it to them. See you again.